The next spreadsheet to complete for submitting county data reports for nutrient sensitive waters annual reporting is to complete the BMP spreadsheet. Instructions are at the top of the spreadsheet. When you open up the BMP spreadsheet, you will see several tables. So there's a unfertilized, unharvested cover crop table, a buffer table. Depending on your county, there might be a water control structure table. There's a table with ACSP BMP information, contract information, and there will be information from NRCS BMPs implemented, and this is more of like an aggregate information, but contract information can be shared. I do have a note there for that. So those are the tables in the spreadsheet. You do have the ability to edit any of the data in the BMP spreadsheet, but the only sections that you really need to edit are the yellow boxes in each of the tables as is stated in the instructions. So the yellow boxes is referring to these yellow cells in the different tables. This BMP spreadsheet is designed to capture county information on best management practices that reduce nitrogen loss from cropping systems that were implemented in the last crop year. Typically, the 3 BMPs that we count toward nitrogen reduction credit include unfertilized, unharvested cover crops, riparian buffers, and water control structures for coastal counties. Each county is asked to provide a best estimate of unfertilized, unharvested cover crop for the species listed: barley, oats, rye, triticale, and wheat. Several counties only report unfertilized, unharvested cover crop implementation that was cost shared on. Some counties report unfertilized, unharvested cover crop implementation based on their knowledge of typical activities by farmers in their area. For example, most farmers in their area and the portion of the watershed under an NSW strategy are planting unfertilized, unharvested cover after tobacco. So they may estimate that 50% of the tobacco acres grown in their county's portion of a NSW watershed had an unfertilized, unharvested wheat cover. So that's what I mean by putting in an acreage estimate for unfertilized cover crop. It can be just cost share information. It can also be based on your LAC's knowledge of typical management activities happening in your area. Additionally, I do have a comment here that you can also review the cover crop acres from the FSA crop report spreadsheet to inform a best estimate. So that might be useful information for you also to consult when you're preparing a best estimate for unfertilized, unharvested cover in crop year 2024 this year. The next part is that each county is asked to provide acres of newly implemented riparian buffer. In this table, I am not asking for an estimate for implemented buffer. This is purely to capture specific acres of projects or actions taken that you know of where new buffer was implemented. So I'm not asking for an estimated acreage amount of riparian buffer in your county's portion of NSW watersheds that you just come up with. I'm asking for newly implemented buffer that's specifically associated with projects that you can point and identify. Typically, the only acres included in the buffer table is acres from cost-shared field borders that are directly adjacent to blue line streams, or cost-shared filter strips, or cost-shared riparian buffer best management practice implementation. Occasionally, a farmland preservation project may have established a new buffer, in which case counties might be interested in reporting that the acreage associated with the new buffer for that farmland preservation project to be included as well, and I do accept that. For buffer, unfortunately, we cannot capture acreage implemented with any mitigation funding. So mitigation is already meant to be offsetting pollution elsewhere in the state, in the watershed. And so we do not get credit for additional pollution reduction resulting from implementation of any particular practice, even if it is on agricultural land, if it is funded with mitigation funds. Coastal counties will see a table for reporting acreage of newly implemented water control structures in NSW basins. All water control structures reported must be under maintenance agreements or to have been inspected and found to be managed for water quality and nitrogen reduction. Inspections must follow a field assessment protocol that the Division of Soil and Water Conservation set up. So no district is required to do that for water control structures that are out of active contract or out of active maintenance. But there is a pathway to be able to count those structures back for credit if that is of interest to your district. Just a quick note for the water control structure piece, the land smoothing practice, that sometimes has an accompanying practice like a water control structure, but because there's nothing in agriculture cost share policy requiring districts to verify if that accompanying water control structure or other practice is functional and being operated by the cooperator to achieve water quality benefits, unfortunately, we cannot count those structures for credit in this table. So I just wanted to make that clear because I know that land smoothing is another common practice for coastal counties. So I know that can be a point of confusion for this reporting process. Throughout the spreadsheet, I have included notes and comments to try and explain the data being requested and specifics for your county based on past reporting assumptions or other items. If you scroll down in the spreadsheet, you will see implementation info on ACSP and NRCS funded practices during crop year 2024. And you may be asked to fill in information in these tables if there are yellow boxes or questions that I've included in the comment section in the spreadsheet. So for this example spreadsheet that I'm showing here, I do have a question and I do have a yellow box in this ACSP BMPs table, which is, was this implemented in crop year 2024? If yes, please specify a date for the contract that was implemented. So that will require some additional double checking and filling in activity for the individual or individuals filling out this spreadsheet. So now we're going to go through the process of fully completing this BMP spreadsheet together. Before I do that, though, I do want to just make a quick note here that there might be some additional like tables or things that I ask you to fill out depending on your county's specific situation or other things like that. Just try and follow what is included in your specific spreadsheet. I'm trying to do an overall example that most counties experience in this video, but it might not cover every specific scenario that you might run into in your own BMP spreadsheet. So if you ever have any questions about what you need to report or whatever, please read through the spreadsheet first and then contact me, Allie Dinwiddie, the division's non-point source planning coordinator, if you do have any questions. All right, we're going to run through the process. So again, the instructions are at the top of the page. I'm just going to briefly run through them here so we can cover everything that we need to do. The first is review state and federal cost share BMP data on page 2. So that would be these tables. The next is reporting a best estimate for unfertilized unharvested cover crops in the Neuse Basin during crop year 2024 in the yellow boxes. So that refers to this table. The next step is to report implemented acres of buffers, not affected acres. So this is like footprint installed during crop year 2024 in the Neuse Basin and the yellow boxes on page 1. And it goes on to say buffer acres can include filter strip acres or field border acres if the border is immediately adjacent to a blue line stream or wetland. So again, this reiterates that buffer acres implemented using mitigation funds can't be reported. So that would be this table. And then the next step is to report affected acres of water control structures implemented during crop year 2024 in the Neuse Basin in the yellow boxes. So that would be this table. And then the last is if you've not already reviewed and reported appropriate data for the crop report, go to that spreadsheet, fill it out, and then to contact Allie Dinwiddie when everything has been completed in your LAC folder. So that's an overview of everything that we're going to go through here when we're filling this out. So let's say that based on conversations with LAC members, farmers that are outside of the LAC, potentially some consulting the FSA data that's back in our crop report. I'm going to say that based on all of that information and consultation, that we're going to increase barley acres to about 200 acres this year. Oats went down to about 500 acres. Rye was also a little bit down at 3,200 acres. Triticale was up at 300, and wheat was a little bit down at 8,500 acres. So again, this is a best estimate, and please try and leverage the resources available to you and come up with a good estimate for unfertilized, unharvested cover that has grown in your county's portion of NSW watersheds and basins. All right, the next table is buffers. So I'm going to scroll down to my table here and see if I had any field borders or riparian buffers implemented in the last year with cost share funding support. So I am not seeing any riparian buffers in the NRCS section, but I am seeing a field border in the ACSP table. So occasionally there might, sometimes if I have time to go back through the contracts and look at the soil survey, I might have a helpful note like this where the field border looks like it's buffering a perennial or intermittent stream. I might not have had a chance to go back and do this for your county. And so this is an opportunity for you to go back to that contract folder and to look at that and see if there is any portion of the field border that is buffering a blue line water body. So let's say for this example, this entire field border acreage was buffering a blue line water body. So I'm going to report that in the buffer table under the 20-foot setback. 20-foot setback is pretty typical for field border acres that are implemented with agriculture cost share funding. All right. So there is now additional field border acres or riparian buffer acres or filter strip acres that were buffering blue line waters that I was aware of this year. So I'm going to zero out all the other categories. And now we go to water control structures. And for that, we had 2 water control structures estimated to be implemented in this crop year. And for that, it looks like in the comments that the contract lists affected acres as 123.45. So conform and add this total to affected acre reported above. So reported above refers to this table here. So let's say we agree with that. All of that water control structure acreage is making an impact in the Neuse Basin. So we're at least going to put 123.45 in there for this year. And then we're going to go down and see, yes, we also had a structure for water control that NRCS implemented as well. And um, I do have affected acres information that I've gathered from NRCS staff, or that I helped out with this project or something, and so I was able to know this off the top of my head. But let's say that there was about 200 affected acres from this newly implemented structure for water control that was federally funded as well. So now we're up to 323 acres of affected acres by newly implemented water control structures in the Neuse Basin. So there's not really too much of a reason why I've highlighted some rows green here. Really, I try and call out the ones that are applicable to your tables above. So, I've got cover crops highlighted, water control structures highlighted, field borders highlighted. In this table, existing, sometimes, I might have not highlighted something correctly. So if that's the case, disregard it. But there might be things like cover crop that is in here that I've tried to pull out and highlight for you, so you make sure to see it. But it's a lot of data to go through, so occasionally I do make omissions. So if that's the case, please make sure that you're looking at that when you're coming up with your estimates. Again, you don't necessarily need to just be looking at cost shared cover crop implementation, because cover crop implementation in North Carolina does seem to be more widely utilized, even if it isn't incentivized with cost share support. All right. So with that, we have filled out all of the yellow boxes in the tables on page 1, but we do have one last yellow box on page 2. So again, we're going back to this question that we covered earlier, which was this implemented in crop year 2024? If yes, specify a date. So let's say that this was a cropland conversion to grass, and it was actually implemented outside of crop year 2024. I could just specify the date. So let's say it was actually implemented in November of 2024. Again, this is outside of crop year 2024, because crop year 2024 ends September 30th, 2024. You can see that in the spreadsheet. So I could just specify a date there. I could also say not implemented this crop year in that box, or in the comment section, just whatever, to make it clear that this practice should not be included in the BMP totals that we tabulate up for your county for reporting this year. So with that we have completed all of our yellow boxes in the spreadsheet, and this is the end of the example for filling out the BMP spreadsheet for county data reporting for NSW strategies. If you do have any questions, please get in contact with me, Allie Dinwiddie, with the Division of Soil and Water Conservation, and I will be happy to answer any questions or provide additional information that you would like.